It's taken 4 years, but the gang members behind one of the most brazen assassinations in rap history have just been convicted. I'm talking, of course, about the blockbuster federal case against O-Block, the most notorious street gang operating in Chicago. After a 3-month trial, 6 gang members were found guilty and convicted for their involvement in a highly public and shocking death of Carlton Weekly, aka FBG Duck. Along the way, O-Block's name has reverberated through the rap game as the stomping ground for drill legends like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, along with the late Fredo Santana and King Von. The question on a lot of people's minds is, how did O-Block get this reputation in the first place? What does his long history of gang warfare mean for the artists who came out of the neighborhood? And what does this landmark gang conviction mean for its future? The thing is, everything about O-Block, from how it got its name to the reason why FBG Duck was killed in broad daylight, goes back to one date, August 10th of 2011. That was the day that O.D. Perry, a 21-year-old member of the Black Disciples, was shot and killed while riding his bike. In order to honor O.D.'s death, the 6400 block of South Martin Luther King Jr. Drive was renamed O-Block by those who lived there. While O-Block already had a reputation for crime, O.D. Perry's murder fueled a whole new surge of gang activity that made O-Block the most dangerous block in Chicago. But it wasn't always this way. Former First Lady Michelle Obama famously lived in that same Parkway Gardens apartment complex before moving away as a child. She even said in interviews how she can't square her childhood memories with what O-Block's legacy has become. At that point in time, if you weren't from Chicago or the Midwest, you may have never heard of O-Block. But that all changed when the Parkway Gardens minted maybe its most important and influential star, a teenager named Keith Cozart, better known as Chief Keef. Keith started to make a name for himself when he was just 16 years old and could find a house arrest. While his music rang out in Chicago, he wasn't really known on a wider scale until his music caught the attention of another Chicago native, you may have heard of him, Kanye West. Kanye spearheaded a high-profile remix of Chief Keef's street single, I Don't Like, and the rest is history. Chief Keef went from being a bubbling local talent to an overnight rap icon, and O-Block's reputation suddenly went global. But even though Chief Keef was getting more shine in the rap world, the war going on in the streets of Chicago refused to let up. You see, Chief Keef, like O.D. Perry, was a Black Disciples or BD. The Black Disciples set was originally part of another gang called the Gangster Disciples or the GDs, but as the years went on, the Black Disciples split from the Gangster Disciples, triggering years of bloodshed and turmoil. And while Chief Keef was celebrating a lucrative $6 million record deal, he could not leave the street politics and his allegiance to O-Block behind. O-Block and the Parkway Gardens were famed Black Disciple territory, and Keef's music never left the gang lifestyle behind. In fact, Keef's music birthed a whole new wave and style of rap called drill that pretty much chronicled the living history of beef between gang members. And even though Keef's name was catapulted into the upper echelons of hip-hop celebrity, he was still locked into the day-to-day back and forth between the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples in Chicago. So when one of the GD's biggest rising talents, an 18-year-old rapper named Lil Jojo, was shot and killed after posting his location on social media, Chief Keef openly mocked his rival's murder. In the middle of all this was FBG Duck, the same man who years later would be crucial to the biggest murder trial in O-Block's history. You see, FBG Duck was a member of the Gangster Disciples, and his gang affiliation made him an enemy of Chief Keef, the BDs, and O-Block as a whole. He had a reputation for being one of O-Block's biggest ops, which in turn put a huge target on his back. Meanwhile, Chief Keef used his newfound fame to lift up those closest to him. His cousin, Fredo Santana, became another talent from O-Block to make it to mainstream levels. Other Black Disciple artists like Lil Durk and King Von followed in Chief Keef's footsteps by translating their reputations in the streets to the charts. At this point, all the pop and drill artists from Chicago were BDs who repped O-Block, which only further cemented the Parkway Gardens' reputation in the rap game. O-Block went from being a local set to a global brand. When you really think about it, artists like Keef, Von, and Durk put a spotlight on O-Block that isn't too different from what NWA did for Compton back in the day. They planted their flag and made sure the whole world knew where they were from and that they stood on what they rapped about. While the BDs had minted multiple star rappers, their main ops, the GDs, had yet to see that same level of success. Lil Jojo came the closest, but he was murdered when he was just a teenager. That meant FBG Duck had to carry the flag for the GDs, and in 2017, he popped off with Slide, a viral hit that got him nearly nearly a $2 million deal with Sony Records. Up to this point, the Black Disciples and O Block had been the dominant force when it came to drill music, but FBG Duck receiving this type of attention began to shift the scales. The question on everyone's mind was if FBG Duck is going to use his new status and record deal to escalate the tension that had already been going on in the streets for years. Chicago had a reputation in the media for being the most dangerous city in America. News of shootings on O Block specifically became routine. So it surprised a lot of people when FBG Duck released a song called Chicago Legends, where he paid tribute to those who died during gang violence, both GDs and BDs. Duck even expressed condolences to Fredo Santana, Chief Keef's cousin who passed away from a seizure. You have maybe the most high-profile GD from Chicago paying respects to his deceased homies and his ops rivals in the same song. Instead, King Von, who had quickly established himself as the next biggest thing from the Parkway Gardens, fired back, not only dissing FBG Duck, but also deceased GD members.
He does have one line that says, "How you tote your gun when your pants tight as hell?" Is that a concern?
That's funny. Yeah.
King Von's response set the tone for the type of time O Block was on. No peace, no goodwill, just straight war footing. The diss was so vicious that it had FBG Duck doing a complete 180. He publicly claimed that he and King Von used to play together as kids, but it didn't keep him from dropping the incredibly disrespectful dead bit, where he walked back on his statements on Chicago Legends and returned to dissing deceased Black disciples like O.D. Perry. For a lot of Black disciples, this was the final straw and it sealed FBG Duck's fate. It also set the events in motion that would decimate the membership of O Block just a few years later. A police informant let the FBI know that the GDs had placed an astonishing $50,000 bounty on FBG Duck's head in retaliation. But O Block later upped the number to $100,000. 100 racks for the life of FBG Duck, the largest bounty placed on a gang member in Chicago's history. Remember, this is the same city that birthed Al Capone amid Prohibition. With 100 racks on FBG Duck's head, it was only a matter of time before someone from O Block came to collect. And on August 4th of 2020, that's exactly what happened. On that day, FBG Duck was in Chicago's Miracle Mile neighborhood, the most affluent, upscale shopping district in the city. Duck was rolling through the neighborhood to shop for his son's birthday as he had just stepped out of the Dolce & Gabbana store. At that moment, a convoy of two vehicles, a black Ford Taurus and a silver Chrysler 300, hit the block. Four gunmen leaped out of cars, and in broad daylight, FBG Duck was assassinated. The shooters immediately fled the scene, leaving only horror in their wake. The circumstances behind FBG Duck's death made national news. Not only was Duck one of the most well-known drill artists from Chicago, his murder happened in full view of tourists and shoppers in an area of the city that was supposed to be considered safe. Some city officials were horrified that the violence that pervaded O Block for so many years had swept into more traditionally affluent areas. Chicago's mayor at the time, Lori Lightfoot, commented on the murder, while other news outlets expressed shock that a luxury shopping district had become the latest arena for gang warfare. Some even commented that a broad daylight gangland assassination in Miracle Mile was emblematic of the city's decline. This kind of publicity meant that both the FBI and the Chicago police were extremely invested in bringing a case against those responsible. But even though Duck's assassination happened in such a public place with tons of potential witnesses, there weren't any immediate arrests. But as it turns out, the FBI had sourced a star witness to get to the bottom of FBG Duck's murder, and it involved a really unlikely informant. Martell Wiley, a blogger who runs a popular channel called Trenches News, was brought on as a crucial federal informant. Wiley would claim that he reached out to the FBI just hours after FBG Duck was gunned down, and he considered Duck a personal friend. Wiley was reportedly paid $25,000 by the FBI for his cooperation in the case against O Block. Nearly a year after FBG Duck's assassination, in October of 2021, 5 O Block members were arrested and charged in a RICO indictment. Another gang member was added to the indictment a few months later. Throughout the trial, federal prosecutors utilized both social media posts and surveillance footage as evidence to the O Block members' participation in the murder. Finally, all 6 arrested O Block members were convicted in January of 2024. FBG Duck's mother, Lashina Weekly, was emotional in the trial's aftermath, thanking the US government for prosecuting her son's killers. But maybe most importantly, she made a pretty serious pronouncement about the future of O Block. They're done. The whole crew, O Block and everything of it, is done. It might be too soon to declare O Block officially over, but a case of this size and scale and seriousness is undoubtedly a huge blow to the crew's power structure. At the same time, the war between the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples persists on the south side. And while we're on the subject of O Block, there's still the legacy of one of the most dangerous, most feared, and notorious members, the late King Von. How much did his music and his untimely death play into O Block's reputation? And how much do we really know about his shadowy past?